To hear us, but we are back in action here on News Now from Fox. So once again joined by Mimi Chan, host of Culture Chat podcast, and we wanted to bring her onto our show to talk about how the shootings in Atlanta last week are sparking conversation for change and really bringing awareness to the wave of anti-Asian American violence in our nation. Mimi, can you hear me now? How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. I hear you loud and clear right now.
Okay, so perfect. Awesome. Well, like we were saying before, Mimi, so I was doing some research and I was on your website and listening to your podcast, and you have been talking about this exact topic even before the shootings last week. I believe in late February, you made an episode about the attacks and, Asian American violence sparked by the COVID-19 pandemic. So tell us about how you've been covering this specific story for, even before these shootings.
Yes, well, thank you for asking that. Actually, sometime last year, I had seen some, infrequent social media posts in regards to some attacks and some racism being shown, especially once the pandemic began. And in all honesty, we have a martial arts organization and we've had students that have also been subject to that harassment. So it has definitely been on top of mind. In all honesty, ever since the former president used words like China virus and Kung flu, it really incited a lot of these issues that have been coming up. And so from a personal standpoint, there have been lots of different instances that has brought to my attention. And so I had talked about it, on and off air as well last year, but I never saw anything in mainstream media showing and depicting the violence that we have seen in the last few months. And thank you to the work of activist Amanda Nguyen and some of the celebrities that started to really bring this to light in the beginning of the year, seeing the elderly community attacked, seeing our Asian American community, being hurt, and now we're at the point of murder. So yes, in February, once I really started to see a lot of these incidents in terms of the video footage and things that were being shared, I definitely felt that it was something I wanted to speak out about even more vocally. And so it's unfortunate that it has led to where we are today with 6 Asian women being murdered. And my heart goes out, of course, to the victims and their families, and just it's been such a horrible, horrible week.
Now, Mimi, obviously, we heard from Atlanta police several times throughout the week where they actually said that this is not being ruled a hate crime, but they are not ruling anything out. What was your reaction once you saw what happened last Tuesday in Atlanta?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Initially, I, like any other citizen, I try to listen, I try to observe, I try to gather information. And so I was first shocked when I saw that this happened. And then as more and more information comes out, with every business being an Asian business, and the fact that 6 Asian women were victims, it, for me, was not difficult to draw a racial component to this act, this crime. And if it's so difficult to rule as a hate crime, then I think that means the technicalities of the law and the legislation or the law needs to be changed. Because if a majority of us in the community can identify that as a hate crime based on the information that we're given and how we feel, and it's hurtful to not define it otherwise, and so that those consequences are not met, because it isn't just a murder. There was 6 Asian women that were victims of this, and for me, it's a very clear-cut conclusion to why this has happened. And maybe this murderer had a sex addiction, but I don't think that it can be lost at who the victims are.
Mimi, we have seen the president, the vice president, leaders in states across the nation respond to these shootings and, really voicing their opinions on the wave of violence that they've seen against Asian Americans recently. What are some key conversations or key points that have been made that have really stood out to you?
Well, when the Lunar New Year was happening, and that was in early, apologize, my brain, early February, it was very comforting to see President Biden speak out against the rise of the anti-Asian hate crimes, and that felt very comforting, and it felt very validating to us as a community that we were not being ignored, because we have been ignored for the past year, as these incidents have been going on. There's over 3,800 incidents reported, and that's reported. So that means there's more, as you know, with issues of harassment and hate crime and crimes of that nature, they're often not reported. So the fact that it's been on such a rise and that we have been ignored, our voices have been silenced, and we took so long, it took these huge tragedies for us to make the mainstream media. It was very comforting to see that support and to feel that we were finally being heard.
Mimi, I know that you work in Kung Fu and teach martial arts, and you are working with young children. So what can you say about what these last couple of months, last week's shootings, and what the world is talking about now? What do our children need to know, and how does this affect our children?
That's a great question. I think the main thing is that we teach our children and our adults the same thing at the Kung Fu school. And one of the main principles is respect and kindness and fellowship and self-control, and applying that to not just yourself, but towards others. And so we teach that regardless of what is going on in the world. And I think if we have all lived by those principles, these crimes wouldn't exist. If we had respect towards one another, and if we were kind, and if we saw everyone equally. And so the great thing about working with children is they see things through such a innocent and different lens. And so we have the ability to then teach them these principles that instill the fact that we all deserve to live happily and equally amongst one another. And I think that it's been very sad to see all of these things happening, and it's not something that children should have to be subject to, but lots of other minority races and backgrounds have had to deal with this for a very long time. So it is not a new conversation that we have with our youth. It's not a new conversation. This is not a new issue of having racial attacks or being treated unequally.
What do you want to see come out of this tragic situation? What do you want to see changed in the future?
Well, first of all, like I said, if it's so difficult for technicalities to draw the conclusion of hate crimes, I think there needs to be something changed there, so that it's much easier to be able to identify and convict and have consequences for those that do this. And the advice I give to everybody is the same that I've been giving to myself. So for one is, obviously we all should be standing up against all forms of racism and hatred, because together is the only way that we're really going to make a difference. And so I've been trying to listen and learn. I mean, even though I'm Asian American, I've been trying to learn about other Asian cultures and tried to start conversations such as the one we're having here. And I've encouraged people to also read, about the history of systemic racism against Asian Americans, because again, this is not a new problem. This started from when, the Chinese first immigrated here. One of the first acts was the Chinese Exclusion Act, right? That start these issues, right, of who belongs and who doesn't belong. And so I think listening and learning is the first step. The second is, there are a lot of organizations out there that speak a lot more eloquently than I do, that can educate and have been doing the work to help those impacted by these crimes, and to help bring these laws into effect that will help with equality, and to actually, make changes. And so donating or just volunteering and learning about some of these places like Stop AAPI Hate, Asians Americans Advancing Justice. There's so many organizations out there. If you follow me on social media, I list them all the time. And then lastly, of course, is to speak out and report these crimes and stand up with your community and with Asian Americans. And that way we can, all start to live amongst one another, equally and happily and peacefully.
Well, Mimi Chan, host of Culture Chat podcast, is there anything else our viewers need to know? Anything else you want them to take away from our conversation?
Again, thank you so much for allowing me to have this platform to discuss this. It's something that I really feel, the rise of these anti-Asian hate crimes and racism since the pandemic can't be ignored, and to be silent is to be complicit. So please stand with us and stand up for us and be a part of the community and ally with us if you're not Asian American. And if you are Asian American, we're with you. I stand with you. And I would like everyone out there to be vigilant and safe and kind and respectful to one another, and stand up to hatred and racism.
Absolutely. Well, Mimi Chan, thank you so much for joining us here on News Now from Fox. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And a huge